what you can expect with this program is to be supported by other like-minded individuals and organizations who believe in your vision. So this is really an entrepreneurial approach, as we at the Sandbox and you as well are very familiar with, is, you know, making things work. Like, let's get going. And as we get going, we're going to make the pieces work. We know we have the vision. We know we have enough support in place. And so the idea here was the main resources that you guys are going to be myself with the Sandbox and the network of people that I'm going to connect us to as we continue to grow through the process together, but also each other. I mean, the number one thing I've been highlighting to other organizations is, you know, in this case, you have Fresh Spoke and you have VetaSpa. You have two organizations who have a similar goal. They're at a similar place and you're moving in the same direction at the same time. So you have somebody else to lean on. On top of that, we also have our existing B Corp community. So an organization like Barriston will certainly be able to play a supporting role at key times. You know, Bush Systems, they have insights they can share as well. There are other B Corps in the region who I'm kind of amassing. And as I keep having these conversations, every one of them just keeps going, yeah, what can I do, right? How do we help people move through? So the whole concept of this program, the backbone of it is that you have other people with you, as opposed to maybe just having to go it alone and then trying to figure it out. And of course, we have the good people of the BDC. So Craig Ryan and Carla Heim and Emily Liu, who have been a massive piece of us being able to even have this conversation right now. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Carla with just one more bit. This is the Slack channel. If you're not familiar with Slack, we're going to get real familiar with it. So this is where our actual channel right there. So you can see I've already said hello team and our welcome, and I've invited you all to that. So we'll go through the process of what that looks like, perhaps on the back of Carla talking, so that we can have that consolidated channel of communication in place and everyone can understand where to look and what they're looking at. Carla, I've done all the talking I think I should do. Welcome and thank you so much for taking on this portion of getting everybody introduced, the idea of the impact assessment and helping them pick the direction that they need to go.
All right. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate being here, and I'm excited that I'm here when you're starting your journey. I mean, that's a great place to start. So I'm really excited for the cohort and everything the Sandbox is doing to create this type of impact. So most of you attended the last session where Craig actually gave you the why, and hopefully you understand that really well and you understand why you're starting this journey today and what's happening globally. You know, it used to be that I would see an article about B Corp, you know, maybe once a week or every other week. And now there are multiple articles every single day globally. So you really are joining a movement that is a global movement, and one that has the right focus on actually creating a better world. So let's get started. So we're just going to do a bit of a review on what B Corp certification is all about, just to set the stage. So as you know, over the last 20 years, there have been lots of certifications out there that still exist and are still extremely relevant. Certifications like ISO certification or certified organic. But what was missing was that you might be actually eating a certified organic apple, but maybe that apple wasn't actually picked by somebody that was being paid a living wage. So there's a focus on good companies, and that's really what we're talking about here today, is overall good companies that very well might have some of those certifications embedded in everything that they do. But the B Corp certification honestly looks at your entire business and the overall health of it. So as we know, there's 3 steps to certification. There's the commitment, which obviously you have all made this commitment and this is the type of business you want to run. There's that performance assessment where we're going to spend a lot of our time today, where you have to score 80 out of 200 points. And there's of course the legal change to consider all stakeholders in everything that you do. Just a reminder, everyone can certify, so anything from a nonprofit all the way up to a multinational, any industry, any geography. But you must be 18 months old. So if you are a startup, and it certainly sounds like some of you, like VetaSpa, you're just getting started, it's a great time to start, because then you're not redoing policy and procedures. You can use the B Impact Assessment as a tool to kind of move forward with. So that's awesome that you're here today. As we said, everybody can be B Corp-ish. That's the one thing I always talk about, is that this is not an exclusive movement. You can actually take the B Impact Assessment. Everybody is available. It's available to all entrepreneurs. It's free and confidential. It's benchmarked against another 100,000 entrepreneurs. There are over 86 different assessments, and we're going to talk about choosing the right one. And there's many tools and guides and examples and reports available within the assessment that I think you'll all find very, very helpful as you create sort of this incubator of B Corps at the Sandbox. Remember, though, going through this process, please only measure what matters to you most. Don't do something just because the assessment says it. You really should be approaching it in an authentic and transparent way, and really look at those areas that were really going to mean something to your business. Like, there's a strong return on investment to focus on those key areas, and that perfection is not the goal. It's simply not the goal with the B Impact Assessment. Just a reminder, most companies right now are scoring around 55 points on average when they start in the B Impact Assessment. Some are like around 30 points, just depending on how much you have organized in your organization, and that the benchmark is 80. And I know that's not 50%, but you'll find it's still very tough to get to the 80 points. It's a journey. Please don't think of this as a destination. Most companies that certify will certify, they'll get over that 80 point, so they're certifying between the 80 and 90 point. And then when they recertify every 3 years, they focus on improvements. So they use that B Impact Assessment as their planning and strategy tool to say, here are the key areas that we think are really important for us to improve on. We want to have a deeper impact in these key areas. And you'll see these 3 companies have actually done that really well in their journey of B Corp. The legal framework, I will show you live on the website where to find that change, but you're really lucky because we've got a law firm on the on the call, so I'm sure that they can help you out with this legal framework and this change that needs to happen. We did talk about the differences between B Corp certification and benefit corporation legislation. So just a reminder, the benefit corporation legislation is actually just meeting that legal requirement. And in 37 states in the US, they have benefit corporation legislation simply because it was illegal to change their articles of incorporation. In Canada, it is not illegal. You can change your articles of incorporation as long as your shareholder and your lawyer is all in line with what you're planning on doing and everybody agrees to move forward that way. However, in BC, we recently passed benefit corporation legislation. So it's actually, as of July 1st, available in BC to incorporate your company as a benefit corporation company. So we'll see how that goes. We know a couple that are on their way. One has already done it. It's brand new, so we'll see what happens there. But like I say, it's not illegal to change your articles of incorporation in Canada. In fact, federally, a year ago, they actually already passed that. So some of it, not the, you still have to do a slight change federally, but it's almost all there. So that is the difference between B Corp certification and benefit corporation legislation. So I just wanted that to be clear. And as we mentioned before, we're almost up to 3,600 B Corps around the world. There are 290 as of today in Canada, in 150 industries and 75 different countries. So it is really a growing movement with over 100,000 users in that B Impact Assessment. So that's a real quick overview of what we're here to talk about today. And now what I'd like to do is move really and focus on the B Impact Assessment. If there are any questions, I actually will actually get the chat up here so that if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or simply take yourself off mute. We have a really small cohort today, so no problem if you want to interrupt me and ask a question.
Yeah, hey Carla, it's Eric here from Beta. Just sorry, I may have missed it. My apologies. So
no problem.
there, B Corp certification, does that mean a legal change in anything they do legally for a corporation? Maybe with Joanne here, it's great to have her answer that question too. Is there any legal things like that you need to do?
Yeah, you do. You do have to change your articles of incorporation to consider
Okay.
all stakeholders, but I do think Joanne is the better person to address that.
Yeah.
Joanne, would you mind?
No, not at all. And it's actually, like, from a legal perspective, a fairly simple thing to do. So you would need to get, we'd prepare a special resolution of the shareholders to sign off on it. And then we draft it. It's fairly easy to draft. It's simply stipulating that when making decisions, you will consider all stakeholders. So it's not just about profit. It's about considering your employees and your community and the environment, et cetera. And so it's a one clause that gets added to your articles of incorporation. And it can be done, Carla, I can't remember the timeline, but I think you have 6 months after you certify to do it. 6 months might be wrong, but you've got some time after you get to the certification process to do the articles of amendment.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that within the B Impact assessment, but it's actually a year that you do have. So you've got some choices on how you want to proceed there.
Okay. So doing that, Joanne, knowing Beta, we'd have to get 100% shareholder resolution on that.
It's a special resolution, but it would also probably your shareholders agreement would have some provision in it about amending the articles. And I don't know what it would say, but that would basically be your reference point probably.
So in the B Impact assessment, we're going to talk about getting started because it is really important to get in the right track. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. We're going to talk about the areas of the assessment, the operational questions, and then the impact business model questions. And then we're going to go live into a test account that I have, and we're just going to talk about navigation because I think it's really important to understand what's actually in that assessment and what you'll have when you leave here today. We'll talk a little tiny bit about submission and tips as well. So obviously we've talked about this before, but I really do want to remind you that there are lots of uses for this B Impact assessment. We talk a lot about this B Corp-ish. So you can use this assessment to assess, compare, and improve. It can be a planning and strategy tool. It's meant to be positive. It's not like you start with 200 points and they keep docking you. Every time you're doing something, they like to reward you for the good that you are doing within the B Impact assessment. So it's really actually meant to be quite positive. It's comprehensive, objective, and standardized. So just a reminder that we are on version 6 of the B Impact assessment. So every 2 years, like the assessment was actually created 14 years ago, and every 2 years, B Lab will actually improve the assessment, consider new laws and regulations, embed new standards and practices, and basically that is the standards trust team that does all of that. So they're looking globally at what the standards are. They're objective, it's comprehensive, it's constantly improving, which is the most fabulous thing about the assessment. But that's why it remains challenging when you go to recertify, because it's constantly considering more aspects of what's happening globally. I think that in version 7, we'll see a lot more around climate within the assessment, and we will also see a lot more around JEDI, so justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's very adaptive, so it depends on who you are as an organization and what you're actually doing. So we'll see that as we go through it. And finally, you can use the B Impact assessment, of course, for your B Corp certification. So choosing the right track, this is really important. So the first thing to consider is, who are you certifying? From the sounds of it, the 2 companies that are on the line right now, you've got one company that you would actually consider certifying. It's possible that the SPA may have a holding company and an operating company. In that case, you would actually be certifying your operating company. But if you have a really complicated organizational structure where you've got, offshoots and different shareholders for different entities and different business streams, you may want to have a chat with me about that, because we just want to make sure you understand exactly who you are certifying and what that actually looks like. So hopefully, I'm just going to assume that nobody has a complicated organizational structure here, and you know exactly which company you're certifying. Is that correct? I'll take your silence as a yes.
Yes, it is
Okay.
fresh spoke for sure. It'll be
Okay,
linear.
awesome. Excellent. So you'll be certifying your main company, so it's pretty straightforward. The next thing we're going to talk about is the size. So size is measured by the number of employees. I'm going to show you later where there's a full description of this so that we make sure that you're choosing the right amount of employees. But right now, if you actually have 0 employees and you just have shareholders that are working within the company, that say own 50-50 or something like that, you would consider you would say 0 employees. And by saying 0 employees when you're creating your assessment, you actually won't get the workers section, because obviously you can't really be measured on employees if you don't have them. So that is one area that's super important to understand. Now, if you have, say, 5 employees and 3 are full-time employees, and 2 are part-time employees, you would have 4 employees within your organization. So there's a bit of an algorithm that I'll share later that you can actually look at when you're creating your assessment to consider how big your organization is. And so that's really important to understand. Now, for the company, like for the spa, I'm not sure if you have any employees right now, but you probably will before you certify. That's what I'm thinking. So you may want to.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Yeah, when just to answer your question, we have 1 employee, which is me, and
Okay.
people supporting, but we're in major flux where we're
Okay.
going to be adding 7 or 8 in the next 4 months, and then
Okay.
30 3 months after that. So it's in flux.
Yeah, that's huge. So what I would do is definitely put the size of employees that you think you're going to have in the next like 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
I would use that as your gauge because you're just starting out. That's going to be a bit in flux. Once you choose that, you can change it, but the critical thing is that there's a difference between 0 and 8 employees, and then basically 9 and up. So I would choose something over the 0 to 8 because that will change the type of questions that you actually receive.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Carla, just a quick question then. So just going back to your point about company founders. So we're not counting company founders into the employees, or will your
You
algorithm
don't.
specify? Okay.
Yeah, you don't include them unless they're working in the company and they own less than, I think it's 20% in
Right.
shares.
Okay.
Yeah, then they can be considered an employee. Yeah. So because you're growing right now, I would definitely put over 8 employees because I think by the time you go to certify, that's where you'll be. But do remember that you can use the support button and ask them to change your employee size when you go to certify. You may need to do that before you certify because it should be absolutely correct when you hit submit.
Yeah, Carla, I guess a little bit on us too. Like one of the things that we like about this is that we're in the process of developing those employee
Mm-hmm.
like contracts, all that kind of stuff, all the documentation that's associated with it, and if
Yeah.
help frame it and get it into those documents, that would be the real bonus. I think this is the time to do it, not do it after the fact. Right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying don't pick 0 because
yeah,
then you won't be
yeah.
able to see it and plan for it. So definitely,
Yeah, exactly. So we will be able to get benefit of it. Yeah, you bet. Okay, that's good to know.
exactly. Okay, all right. So hopefully that's understood, but I'm also going to show you a bit of a cheat sheet so that you can figure that out before you start.
Okay.
The next 2 sections are industry and sector. And these are really, really important, mostly your sector, simply because it will actually determine the type of questions that you actually get as well. Now, this is a really busy slide. How can everybody read this well, or? Okay. One thing I want to remind you of is I will actually share this, this portion of my deck with the Sandbox so that you have it as a reference point. So the next thing that they'll ask you is what's your sector? Now this is really important, and there are a few little nuances here that I'll go through. I'm going to go through all of them just simply because we are recording, and then you'll have a bit of an explanation if you share it with somebody else. So the very first one is manufacturing. So manufacturing is a company that manufactures greater than 10% of its products for sale or manufactures products for sale by another company or brand. So this would be contract manufacturers, assembly lines, breweries, and actually includes livestock. So it's not under agricultural growers. Livestock is actually under manufacturing. So that's something to consider. Wholesale and resale is a company that sells physical products and does not own or operate the manufacturing process or facilities responsible for the creation of those physical goods. So again, this would be consumer goods, e-commerce, retailers, that type of thing. Services with minor environmental footprint, a company that earns revenue through the provisions of non-physical services. Company does not sell a physical product or does not own or operate a retail, wholesale, or manufacturing facility. So this would be a law firm, for example. So that's probably what Barriston Law actually certified under, was services with minor environmental footprint. Services with major environmental footprint is probably going to be your spa, for example. And that's a company that works in a service industry with a material environmental footprint due to its facilities supply chain or the intensity of its operation. So this might be hotels and restaurants and landscaping companies, for example. And finally, agricultural growers, a company that operates a farm, agro-processing facility, or sources crops directly from farmer growers for a majority of the raw input materials. Now again, this does not include livestock. That would be in manufacturing. So I think that the spa will be in services with major environmental footprint. And for Fresh Spoke, I think you're going to be in wholesale retail from my quick explanation. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we are going to be doing some aggregation, meaning that so the facility in Barrie right now will only be doing distribution, so definitely wholesale retail. But we're starting to develop partnerships with the other municipalities where we will be doing aggregation, which means we will be bringing in produce and basically doing light processing and bagging or putting those in case packs and sending them out to hospitals, universities, and so forth.
Okay.
So can you be two things?
No, you're gonna pick only one.
Okay.
And you're probably going to pick the one where the most of your revenue is coming from. So you'll look at, you know, what is the distribution.
Okay.
And so it sounds like the second portion will be coming in the next couple years, maybe.
Yeah.
So you may certify under wholesale retail this time, and it may change next time, just depending.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Carla, just a quick question. You may get this, so I apologize. When I was filling out the application there was a categories list, and it was a list of like probably 10 to 12 different categories. I didn't see anything, and unfortunately, it's not the same as the sectors, and maybe you're going to get to it in your presentation here, but that I was a bit confused at that. The categories didn't seem to, there was nothing that I could see that would fit that what we do at
Yeah, so I may have to share a screen with you in order to really talk about that, but are you sure that you picked the right sector?
Well, maybe not, and that could be my bad. And I don't want to take any more time here. Maybe I can get that solved. Jesse, you can maybe. I know we're emailing right after that last session.
Was that in the B impact assessment, or was that my application form?
Your application form, yeah.
Mm.
Okay, yeah. So that was probably the SDGs that he's referring to, the 17 different ones, and we had said basically which ones resonate with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There will be some crossover in this presentation about that, though.
Oh.
And that's actually my next slide. So perfect timing.
Hey.
So, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals were obviously goals that were created by the UN Global Compact that globally most municipalities, cities, countries are actually focusing on to reach some, obviously big goals in terms of climate and social impact. Now, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals are often, they don't really come down to business very easily, um, especially in Canada. I do B Corp 101s across the country, and most times if I ask a group of, say, 30 people, have you heard of the SDGs? Maybe one will put up their hand. But, they are getting more visible, and they're very visible in Europe. But basically what they are is there's 17 goals that are focused on different aspects. So it might be water, it might be gender equality. So there's different 17, they're all different. And so really what B Lab, the nonprofit organization behind the certification, really wanted to do was really map their assessment to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so B Lab and the UN Global Compact got together and they created the SDG Action Manager. And this is specifically for businesses to start to think about how they can plug into those development goals. Now, when you log into the assessment, you're going to see this, but please don't go there first because they're very academic. They're very, very detailed. And if you want to get discouraged really fast, start here, basically. But the lovely thing about it is if you complete the B Impact assessment, you can port all of your answers over to the SDG Action Manager, and it'll show you where you're actually having an impact. And then usually what I suggest is you pick maybe one or two that are really important to your organization and focus first on those two goals, potentially. But firstly, what I really want you to focus on is your B Impact assessment, and then you can look at that. I will also show you within the B Impact assessment that every single question is linked to a sustainable development goal. So you'll actually get a feel for where you're having impact, and you can be exploratory there as well. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll look at that a little bit deeper when we go into the assessment. So the impact areas of the assessment are governance, workers, community, environment, and the impact of your products and services. With that, depending on how you've actually created your assessment, it will basically be weighted based on the criteria that you've put in there. So I have one example here of a manufacturing facility with 10 to 49 employees. For their assessment, 5% will be on governance, 20% will be on workers, 22.5% will be on community, environment will be 22.5%, and their impact business model piece will be 30%. So that's how the questions will be weighted within their assessment to come up with the 200 points. So every single time every different company has a different weighting system, basically based on the criteria that they input. So just to let you know that the system is obviously adaptable there as well. So getting into the 4 different kinds of questions within the impact assessment, this is really important to understand the nuances. So a gating question is simply the system trying to get you to know a little bit better. So once they know you a little bit better, they can start producing the questions that you actually should see. So a gating question is simply asking you about the company, but there are absolutely no points associated with it at all. So once they understand that, they will create probably operational questions or an impact business model for you. And I'll show you how that works in the assessment when we get to the navigation piece. An operational question is simply about your operations, and an impact business model question is specific to an actual like basically an impact that you're having that you have measurable outcomes for. And we'll talk about the difference here in a few minutes. And finally, if you're going for certification, there are the disclosure questions, which are going to ask you about, you know, your company, do you have any legal action, anything like that. So you've actually got to disclose anything that might be going on. Now, every question is based on your policies, your procedures, your measurements, your improvements, and your outcomes. So if you say yes, that you're doing something, then you better have a policy or procedure or measurement, improvement, and outcomes to actually support your answer, because that will be part of the certification process. The standards team will receive your assessment and your policy and procedures, and they will start doing a review on all of that.
Carla, just a quick question, Eric here. What if we don't have those procedures, but we want to put them in the procedures?
Yeah, for sure. So I will specifically show you how to manage that in the navigation when you're going through the assessment.
Okay, thank you.
So as I mentioned, operational questions will go into the 4 different sections, and they are actually looking at your day-to-day business. So things that you're doing on average in a day-to-day. So they are very specific to the operation of the company. So in governance, we'll start here. How I've done this in my presentation, because everybody will be different. But in governance, it's going to look at your mission and engagement and your ethics and transparency. They're going to be referencing key terms and key policy and procedures, for example, that you might have within your organization. So they're going to look at stakeholders, materiality assessment. So what are your risks? Your mission statement. And quite often a mission statement is actually not just that I produce this great widget, it's that I produce this great widget with this impact. So a really good example of that is 10 Tree, which is an organization that sells t-shirts, but their mission is actually reforestation. And so their goal for reforestation is to sell a t-shirt and then they plant 10 trees for every t-shirt they sell. And they actually have a tracking dial on it, so you can actually see where your trees are being planted. So they're really leading with their purpose and their impact, and they just happen to sell clothing as well. So quite often your mission statement, you really want to also include whatever your purpose and your impact is. It looks at your board of directors and your advisory board. Not saying that you have to have both, but it will ask you questions about that. It looks at your whistleblowing policy, your code of ethics, financial controls, and finally your ethics and reputational risk. In workers, it looks at financial security, health and wellness and safety, career development, engagement, and satisfaction. And the key terms under workers are, do you pay a living wage? And I've actually provided you a link that the standards team uses for Canada. Healthcare and supplementary benefits and workplace health and safety. Professional development and training, and also those skills-based training that are ongoing within your organization for your workers. Paid time off. Worker flexibility. I often say now that worker flexibility is pretty high now, considering now we're all working from home and we didn't think that would be a possibility before the pandemic. So right now, flexibility is quite high. Attrition and departed employees, an employee handbook, internal promotions, and finally, end of employment support. So you can see here in the worker section, if you have actually really developed all of this, you're actually going to be in a pretty strong position. And you're likely going to be able to attract, retain, and motivate your employees well, because you're really considering all this aspect that's really important to your workers. So I think this is one of the areas that you really get a high return on investment. So if you're having high employee turnover, that can be so costly to your organization. And so, you know, I would recommend somebody that actually is just new to the B impact assessment to start in the workers. If that's an area where you've got some pain, start in the workers section. And, you know, you can definitely use the assessment that way as well. The next section is community. Now, this is a big section. It looks at diversity, equity, inclusion, your economic impact, civic and engagement and giving, and supply chain management. Some of the key terms here are obviously inclusive work environment, which with everything that's going on with JEDI, so justice, equity, diversity, inclusion right now, these are key terms that everybody's looking at and seeing how they can improve on this. Management of DEI, measurement of diversity, a racial or ethnic minority, and goes into all the different aspects of what that means to have a strong JEDI program. It looks at what's your local impact, so that's within 90 kilometers of your business. It also looks at how you participate in your community with reference to charitable donations or pro bono services, for example. It looks at suppliers, significant suppliers, and independent supplier screening, supplier evaluation, and outsourced staffed. The supply chain management section is obviously another area which you can get a high return on investment for. Almost every company could do more work here that I deal with. If you have a tight supply chain management program, it will actually encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion. It will also set you up for stronger relationships with your suppliers, and then it will also help you to have complete transparency in who you're dealing with as well. So that's another significant area to really think about. And I just want to point out here, outsourced staff is the questions are under community and not within workers. So if you're hiring in a contractor to come in and do some specific work with you, it would be under community and not under workers. I get that question a lot, so hopefully that makes sense. And finally, the environment section. So obviously climate action is huge right now, and it will be our top priority for years to come. But for a business, it can really be different. So if you're a business that's just, you lease some space and that's really the only environmental impact that you have, the environment section is going to be really simple. You're just going to be looking at your scope 1 emissions, which really are just where you're located, what's your lease agreement like, what's the building like that you're in, and then maybe your vehicles or your commuting as well. So that area is pretty straightforward. But if you're a manufacturing facility, there are a lot more environmental questions that you'll need to address. So it can be very complicated. For the environmental section, if this is really new to you, I always recommend starting with learning what scope 1, 2, and 3 is all about. So a little piece of homework I have is just Google scope 1, 2, and 3, and you will get a number of different infographics on exactly what that is. So scope 1 is really about direct impact that you have on your facilities and vehicles, as I mentioned. It's the easiest area because it's actually under your control normally. Normally you can report on what your emissions are based on your electrical bills and your gas bills, etc. And then you can look at ways to improve on them slightly just by being more efficient. Scope 2 are indirect. And this would be like fuel and waste, your workers commuting back and forth, your business travel, that's scope 2. Again, fairly easy because some of that is within your policy and procedures, and policy and procedures are usually easier to implement than measurements, for example. And scope 3 is indirect. Now this is more tough because you don't have direct control over some of these things. So this would be distribution, end of life cycle, that type of thing. So scope 3 is usually more difficult to address. So under scope 1, 2, and 3, there are a lot of different things that we can be talking about. So there's the green building program, example is LEED certification, environmental management programs, cradle to cradle, certified organic, value chain impact, life cycle assessments, low impact renewable sources, certified carbon credits, ton mile, wastewater, hazardous waste, source reduced, product reclamation, chemicals, biodiversity management, zero waste are just a few to mention. So this can be quite a complicated area. And if it is for your organization, we do have a partnership with Climate Smart, and I think it's a great place to start. Climate Smart is a B Corp certified company located in Vancouver, and they've worked with a number of businesses to help them set up their management of their environmental emissions. So they do training, certification, and they have software tools. And what I do really like about them is they do operate in a cohort method. So it's priced very reasonably based on your revenues. And they can set you up with a tool to manage this and help you set that up from the beginning. So if that's something that you really want to do, I do recommend Climate Smart. I think they're a great group of people that have been around a long time doing this work. And they're, like I say, they're very reasonable because they're set up in a cohort method.
Carla, Eric here. What percentage of the rating is on environment? Just curious to back that.
Pardon me? Sorry, can you repeat that?
The percentage of the rating is because of on the environment. What percentage was that?
So the percentage will change. If you are, basically we looked at the different sectors. If you have minor environmental footprint, your rating on environment will be quite low because obviously you don't do that much and you haven't got a huge impact there. If you are a manufacturing facility, it's going to be a lot higher.
Okay.
So it'll depend on the type of business that you are.
In our case, we're services with major environmental footprint. So
yes. So you will have
about the B Corp because being a startup, we can't invest into renewables or into solar and all the geothermal stuff. So capital costs are just restrictive for us. So we are going to be a lot of gas. We are going to be taking a lot of power. Certainly, we're doing a lot of things on the restaurant front. Marcia could attest to this just with Anahita and the organic farms and stuff like that. That's certainly a plus. But we are not it's certainly very difficult for us given that situation. I'm a bit worried about that one. It's turned into
you'll have to see what it's like when you go through it, but it does ask you about everything. And do remember that this is a journey. So obviously when you're starting up, you might not be able to do some of these things, but you may set some goals to do them. And the first thing in environment to do is just measure. So simply measure what you're doing. And you'll notice when you go through the assessment, the difference between like a question that just requires a policy or a procedure, those are really easy to change. They're your low-hanging fruit because you just write a policy about it. Things that you have to measure, and then obviously then you actually measure year over year, and then you actually set targets, and then you actually report on your outcomes. That can take 2 to 3 to 5 years to really show that you've got an improvement, right? So the assessment does take that into consideration, the different levels. And you'll see that in some of the questions, like the question might be out of, say, 3 points, and then you're ticking off which ones that you do. And maybe you're just doing, 1 or 2 of those, so you'll get like partial points for a question, for example. So it is set up in that kind of way where it's rewarding you positively for the things that you're actually doing. And then as you deepen your impact, it rewards you even more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, good. I got it. We're doing small things, things like insulating pools and things like that to certainly help because the pools are exposed. Just do it now and make sure.
That's right.
Those are kind of easy things, but the big ticket items for us, like we have pool. Unfortunately, we're running pools right through the middle of winter. Unfortunately, we're dealing with with our pools. We try to cover the pools and we do the best we can, but this is very, very challenging. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, that would be challenging. Absolutely. So that's those are the operational questions to give you an idea of what kind of questions you'll be getting in those different areas. And now I want to talk about impact business model. Now this is a part of the assessment that shows up that is slightly different from operational questions. These are clear impact business models that you set for your organization. And they're more intensive and intentional systems, basically. So to give you an example, in operations for recycling, you would report that you recycle your waste. But if you had an impact business model with recycling, you'd be selling recycling services or technology. Under donations, under operations, you'd be donating to charity on the occasion. But the impact business model would be a buy one, give one model. And I explained to you 10 Tree. They sell a t-shirt, they plant 10 trees. That would be their main impact business model. Hiring under operations, so that they would ask if you have a diverse workforce, but an impact business model would be having a workforce development program that targets individuals with barriers to employment. So it's very different in the structure of it. And while most businesses will have one impact business model, which I will show you because it's actually a requirement for certification, basically most businesses don't have more than maybe 2, maybe 3 if they're really, really looking at impact. So don't be discouraged if you don't have an impact business model. There are actually 24 B Corps, certified B Corps in Canada that don't have an impact business model at all. Where they get all their points is in the way they operate. So that is perfectly understandable. But most companies now are actually looking at the impact of what they're doing, and they're taking that a little bit more serious. And so if you do have an impact business model, it is strong in the points, that's for sure, because on average, an impact business model will give you about 30 points. Some are even upwards of 60 points. So definitely it's one of those things that's rewarded highly within the assessment. There are lots of different ways to have an impact business model, and some of the ones identified are for developing countries only. So not all will apply to you. But I think it's important for me to go through this with you, and this is something that we have a program called Getting to 80. And a lot of that program is really looking at what is the impact of your products or your services and building that out. And what we've found, and we've ran now, I think we're on to our 8th or 9th cohort since we developed the program, is that folks will come in and say, you know, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But when they leave the program, they clearly understand the focused impact that they want to have. And I think that's important for any business model, is to have that clear focus, because we simply can't do everything. And you know, it's really important to have obviously purpose and impact embedded in your business, but it's also important to be viable as a business. So really linking it to your goals, your purpose, your impact. So that's really important. And so what we find in Getting to 80 is that most people will leave that program with a clear impact business model. And I think that is really helpful in terms of the strength of your business, because then you're able to communicate that internally and externally. So taking a look at this, the first one that we're going to take a look at, these are the impact business models. Now this is a really busy slide and you probably can't see it, but I just wanted to outline them for you when you get this deck later. And you can see there's a number of different ones. I also have at the bottom here, it says industry addendums. So there are also impact business models that are called addendums based on industry. So for example, BDC is a certified B Corp, and our industry addendum is the banking addendum. So we will get specific questions about our industry, but not all industries have that. So the other one would be the construction industry also has one. But there aren't that many industry addendums right now. So this is an overview of them all. But what I thought we'd do is go through some examples of under each section, and ones that are the most common that are in Canada right now. So this one, under governance, there's mission locked. Now this is the actual impact business model that most of you will have. And this comes to the changing of your articles of incorporation to consider all stakeholders. This change is actually worth 10 points. But as we mentioned earlier, it's not required when you go to submit your certification. You do have a year to change that. However, some organizations have decided to do it before they submit, and simply because it does give them 10 points. So if you're maybe low on points, you may consider actually having this in the beginning when you go to certify. Otherwise, you do have a year to actually achieve this. But as I mentioned, it's the one given impact business model that every single company will have. Under workers, there's only one, and it's actually called Worker Owned, which is actually an employee ownership share program. Now, under the employee ownership share program, you actually have to have over 40% of your workers participate in the employee ownership share program to achieve this. And if you're 0 to 8 employees, it's worth 15 points. If you're above that, it's worth 30 points. Now, there's only 3 certified B Corps that have this, but they do have really, really excellent examples. One is Chandos Construction out of Calgary, and the other is Beau's Brewery, which is in Ontario, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They have a really awesome one as well. The next example is under community. So the 2 that I chose are really popular ones within certified B Corps in Canada. So supply chain poverty alleviation. Over 20 B Corps actually have this as an impact business model. And it recognizes supply chain strategies that reduce poverty through trade terms, positive labor conditions, and support for underserved. So this might actually be like fair wage certified suppliers, ones like that. The next one is Design to Give, which I've given you an example of already of Tentree. So it's basically the buy one, give one model. The other example obviously would be Tom's Shoes. They're also a certified B Corp and they have that as well. That's pretty straightforward. But actually 40 B Corps in Canada actually have the Design to Give impact business model.
Question there on that Design to Give model, Carla. Are there specific requirements around that as far as what qualifies you to be Designed to Give? So let's just say, for instance, if I was Fresh Spoke, I'm Marcia, somebody purchases one of the farm to table kind of boxes potentially that we sell, and then for every 1 box that gets purchased, 1 box gets donated. Is that qualifying?
That's qualified, yeah.
If I was spa and, you know, if someone bought a Veta Spa, you know, bathrobe and we planted a tree in the region, is that Designed to Give?
Yep. Yeah, if it's a core part of your business model, what we'll do is when I go live into the assessment, we'll go under the support button and we'll actually pull up Design to Give. I've made a note for that, and I'll show you how you can definitely dig a little bit more into these impact business models to truly understand what the requirements are.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in that because we're just implementing a program right now that is, we actually give all of our customers the ability to generate, to accumulate credit. So they get 1% cash back, and we're starting to give them a discretionary option to divert that 1% over to basically somewhat of an agricultural trust program that enables young farmers to get into farming.
Right.
So, but we don't we give the buyer the ability to do that on their discretion. So I guess, you know, that's my question is that still considered impact? Or would we as a company have to be, I mean, technically it is our 1%, but would we as a company, you know, be needing to contribute and show financially how we're contributing to that as well?
You might. I'd have to look up that example specifically. So let's look at that a little bit. I think it would qualify. It qualifies, for example, if you participate in 1% for the planet, basically. So it's highly likely if you set it up that way, but there may be restrictions based on percentage.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll look it up for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. So under environment, there are obviously a lot. Under resource conservation, there's actually 33 B Corps that have this specific one. And it recognizes products and services that reduce resource use and or limit waste to the landfill. So a really good example of that is Pila. Pila makes, I don't think Craig used that example. It's in my initial deck. Pila is a company that makes products out of the straw, the waste straw, that is normally burned on farmers' fields, but they have actually found a way to use it as a product, and it's biodegradable. So Pila makes biodegradable phone cases. So obviously resource conservation would be one that they actually participate in, because they divert a ton of waste to the landfill by using a biodegradable product. So toxin reduction and remediation, there's actually 45 companies in Canada that have this impact business model, and it's recognizing products and services that reduce or remediate toxins or pollution. So this would be non-GMO, hazardous discharge, for example, those types of things. So lots of companies are really thinking about that. And Bellico, the unscented company in Montreal, they would be a really good example of that, because they produce non-toxic, non-harmful, and non-fragranced cleaning products. And finally, there's the impact that you can have actually on your customers. That's a real important piece, and kind of ties into what we were talking about before in terms of giving them the opportunity to make a difference. So the examples I've chose here is support for underserved, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and that is 70 of our B Corps in Canada actually have this impact business models. And this is companies whose products or services offered to purpose-driven enterprises. So this would be like nonprofit companies, B Corps, and purpose-driven enterprises that you actually do business with. And obviously health and wellness is obviously a big impact. So there's health and wellness improvement, and actually 18 of our certified B Corps are doing that. And it recognizes products and services that promote the health and wellness of individuals. So, you know, technically your spa might actually be able to be under this impact business model.
Like this one. I mean, this
Yeah.
is our bread and butter. So
yeah.
God.
So this is one that I would highly recommend you investigate, right?
Oh,
So
I would love to investigate this one, because what we're all about. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm
so
glad you enlightened me, because I was going, oh my God, I don't know if I can do there or not. I was getting a bit worried, but when I see this one, it
gives you hope, right?
I hope,
yeah.
For the end.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's just so many ways to participate and develop that within your business, but the more it aligns to your core business, the better. And so obviously this is a great example of that. So that gives you an overview. Hopefully that helped you actually think about the assessment in a way that you can strategically start to complete the assessment and build out exactly what matters most to you. The final thing I want to do here is actually go into navigation. And so I'm going to actually stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to go into another screen to log into the actual assessment. And I'll make this big so you can see it. Okay, could everybody see that okay? No problem? Great, awesome, excellent. And I'm just gonna get rid of this question thing here. There we go. So I have a test account that I like to show everybody, because normally I do these things in person, and so I've had to adapt based on doing it remotely. And so I find this is really helpful for folks to navigate properly within the assessment. And I'm just going to get rid of this because Here we go. I don't want any windows blocking what you can see. So this is what the actual B impact assessment looks like once you create your account. I have an ice cream shop. That's my particular example company. And you can see here that I started it in 2019, or I'm active as of 2019 in version 6. So I'm actually in the version 6 assessment. You can see my market, my size, and my sector. I'm probably services with minor environmental footprint, or actually major environmental footprint. And if I scroll down, you can see this big SDG action manager that I've been talking about. And that's why I actually explain it to you, because it is really front and center within the B impact assessment. But I definitely don't want you to start here. I want you actually to start in the B impact assessment. It gives me a summary right now of where I'm at. Overall, I have a score of 37.9, but you'll see here that I've actually only completed 50% of the questions. Under operation questions, I've actually earned 26.7 points, and under impact business model, I've earned 10 points. So as you can see here, I have a really good summary, and this is the dashboard where you can start. The next thing I'm going to show you before we get started on the questions and everything is this support button. So hopefully everybody can see it in the lower corner. It's a blue button that says support. This support function is available on every single screen within the B impact assessment, and you'll even see it before you create your account, which is really important to know, because you have a question about like, oh, wait a second, how many employees should I actually put in here? It will actually tell you those things. So if I go number of employees, we'll just see. So I can type in anything that I want to actually see. And if I go number of employees, the first article that's found is calculating your full-time equivalency FTE workforce to determine your track size. And I click on it, and it actually gives you a full explanation of what everything is. So it even goes into temporary full-time employees and gives you the amount that it's actually calculated on, and it gives you quite a bit of information. So that's where you can actually find everything that you need to see. Now this, for me, is the gold within the B impact assessment, that they have embedded all of these tools and resources right into the assessment. The other thing that we talked about is design to give. What are impact business models? You can actually pull that up and it'll tell you exactly what an impact business model is. It has to be verifiable, lasting, goes through, they're extraordinary, and they go through absolutely everything. I'm just going to see if they have the design to give one here. So if we look at the different impact areas, if I click here, it's going to bring up, can you guys still see that when I pick it up, when I do it?
It's a little tough, but
yeah, it's pretty small, but it'll actually build it out a little bit more for you here as well. So you can download them, you can go back. Impact business model scoring. It will actually talk to you about the scoring, and it'll give you the score for every single impact business model that is out there. Again, really, really important information here as you're going through the assessment. You could say living wage, for example. And it'll bring up some information about living wage. So absolutely anything that you really want to know about here is included within the assessment. It'll actually give you information on how to go through the, when you actually go to submit, the recertification process, everything is here. So this support button is your gold. Please remember it and use it often if you have any questions.
Just so you guys know, that's free with this program.
Yeah. It's absolutely free with everything. So definitely use it. It's incredible how they've built it up over the past few years.
And Carla, obviously that support button is referencing some kind of holy grail of answers. Is there an overarching like book or some kind of guide that has all the answers to everything? I mean, I would use the support too, but just out of interest, is there an actual?
Well, they do have a couple of things that you can take a look at. They have under the bcorporation.net website, they have a guide that you can actually download, but probably all of your information is more so going to be in the support button. I would actually go there first. It's the most comprehensive and up to date because they're continuously improving that information. So that's basically, that's the book right there, your support button. But there are a couple books that have been written about B Corp. One being one that was just, and I'll send you these links, issued, it came out September 15th, I think. So it's actually only been out for about a month. It's really awesome. It goes through the history and the why really well. And then there's also a B Corp handbook that Ryan Honeymoon created a number of years ago and just actually released a second version, which kind of goes through it as well. But I actually find those books are probably a little bit more dated because B Lab is constantly improving what they're doing. So the support button is probably your most relevant, but I can share the links of those books as well with you. So when you're working within the B Impact Assessment, I recommend that you work solely and exclusively from the question filter. So I'm going to click on the question filter right now, and I find this is the easiest area to work in, especially when you're doing it for the very first time. The reason is that all of your questions are right here. They're all listed by section, by subsection. And even if you have an impact business model, you'll see right here under mission lock, there's the impact business model. So it's all listed here in a really easy, digestible way. A few things about it, it will do it by section. So in governance right now, my operational score is 4.9. I've actually completed 16 of the 21 questions that need to be answered. And my impact business model score is currently 10. Then when you go down here, you can see under mission engagement, here's all of the questions. If you see an orange bar right by the question, that means I've answered the question in this section. So if I click on level of impact focus, you can see it here, and you'll notice here the points available for this question are 0. So what does that mean? It's a gating question. So it's actually just trying to find out a little bit about my organization. If you look at the top here, you'll see something that's called feedback, and you can provide feedback to B Lab so that maybe in version 7, they slightly change something that you feel should be changed. So you can do that under any single question in the impact assessment. And up here are really important, especially for companies that are, developing all of this as you go through. So the star, you can set a goal for yourself. On every single question has this option. When I click on it, you can see that it asks, my current answer provided is this. And then I can actually set a goal that we actually want to have a deeper impact here maybe. And I can say I want to do this within 6 months to a year. And I can actually even ask the system to remind me that I've set a goal that I want to achieve. So goals are, you can use this function if you find it's helpful for you internally. And then this right here is called the bookmark. And you can actually click on the bookmark to bookmark a question that you need to come back to. So for example, when we were talking about whether or not you actually had this in place or not, it might be more aspirational. So you may want to flag it or bookmark it that you do have to come back to it because you need the policy and procedures to support the way you've answered this question. So that would be one way of sort of flagging those areas you do need to come back to and that you have to make sure that you've got the policy and procedure for. Or you could set them as goals. And you can actually create reports based on the goals and the bookmark function. Once you're done with a question, you can click on it and it'll close it. You can also just leave it open and you can scroll down to the next question. So under the very first section, governance, the one impact business model, of course, is mission lock. So let's take a look at that right now. So what I've done here under impact business model, I have actually said as an independent or publicly owned business, I've amended my corporation governing documents to adopt a legal entity or a governance structure that requires consideration of all stakeholders in its decision making. Example, benefit corporation or changing your articles of incorporation. And because I chose that, I've actually earned points. So I've actually, because of that level that I've done, I've actually earned 10 out of 10 points. But let's say I've just adopted a specific legal entity or governance structure that preserves mission over time, but does not require consideration of all stakeholders in its decision making. Example, a cooperative, because that's the way they're structured. Let's say I change my answer to that and I save it. I actually only get 7.5 points out of 10 there. And if I want to change it back, I can click here and I can save it and I can see how that affects my score. So this is important if you want to play around with the scoring structure just to see what that question is worth and whether or not it'd be worth investing on. You know, you can use it that way. There's also a section up here.
It's just a stupid question, I guess, but you know, obviously you're not going to be able to complete this in one setting. You're going to be back and forth in this. It saves all your stuff. You have to click save somewhere. I thought these are detailed questions, I know, but
yeah, you do. Well, though it's a really good question. Yes, you have to save it before you go on, and the save button will appear, and then it'll change your answer. And simply because every answer has to then be recalculated within the system, so that's why you're saving each question.
Okay, and then you can go back into it and it'll save whatever you had.
Yeah,
before.
exactly.
So
This whole assessment is so fluid. You can go back and forth and change, and you know, nothing is set in stone until the day you submit. And then really the day you submit is sort of what you're submitting for the standards team.
Okay, it goes on a cloud server somewhere, it saves. Okay, good enough.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Is there a time limit, Carla? Is there any like timeout of like didn't touch it for? Okay, okay.
Yeah, no time
sure.
limit at all. The only thing that will happen is when they do announce that they'll deploy version 7, you'll get a number of emails, whether you're certified or not, because you're active in the B Impact assessment, to say, okay, listen, we're going to be transferring all your answers to the version 7, save your work, print your work, do whatever you can, because it'll instantly convert over, but they give you like 4 or 5 months to do that. So they really give you lots of notice if that's going to happen. So if you click the Learn button, what it'll do is it'll give you some explanations. So this question, and it gives you a reason why this is so important. It will also give you, in this particular one, some examples of businesses that have done it well. And it'll give you some implementation examples and guides. And if I go back to explanations, you can see here that under the Sustainable Development Goals, you can actually see what topic that it references as well. So in addition to the support function, which is always located in the bottom screen, you can actually go into that Learn button here to find out a little bit more information as well. So I'm going to scroll back up here because there's a really interesting piece of the question filter that I find also very handy, is you can print this entire document. You can download it to an Excel document. So if you're working within an organization where you want to parse it out, or you want to kind of work in an Excel spreadsheet to sort of share it with different folks, etc., you can do that. I know in my organization we're so large that this is extremely important to me when I'm going through the assessment. The question filter, you can actually reset things. So under question type, maybe I only want to see my impact business model questions, for example. If I click that, all I'm going to see are the impact business model questions within the assessment that I've answered. Now I'm going to use customers and arts, media, and culture as an example here. So you'll see here that I have answered the very first question, and that there are a number of questions underneath there that are showing up. So if I expand this first question, it's basically asking me which of the following products and services descriptions best fit your company. And I've said products or services has a core purpose of independent journalism. You'll notice here this is a gating question. And so it's actually determining, okay, what do I need to provide for additional questions based on your answer? If I said these descriptions do not apply to our company or products and services, and I save this, what you'll find is that all of those additional questions disappeared because I actually don't have this impact business model. So the system's not going to ask me any additional questions on this. So if I go back and say that my products or service has a core purpose of independent journalism, I'm going to save that again. And you'll see here that because now I do have this impact business model, I will have additional questions. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, it certainly does, Carla. Got a more details question. Can more than one person come from a corporation, from Beta, for example, go in and update their section? We're not big and complicated BDC, but certainly we may have 2 or 3 different people going into this. Can they all just log in and do their thing, or do they have? Is it only work on one login entry, or how did that work?
Yeah, so you can set up the settings within your. If I look at settings.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. There we go. If I look at team members. Oh, there's an error with mine right now. Maybe they're updating it.
Team members, you can, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Nice answer.
So you can allow people to be a part of data sharing, and then in your team members, you can change that too. And I'm not really sure why. I can't see the team members right now. I'm not sure why that's coming up.
An option then. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, you can definitely set it up. You can use either way to do that. So basically the question filter is, I think, the best place to work within the assessment to gradually go through it and flag and star and then come back to things. I find it's the easiest area. There are also a number of reports that you can actually run. The improvement report is really interesting because it includes both the starred, so your goals that you've set for yourself, but it also includes areas that basically the system is saying, based on your answers, you might be able to improve these goals fairly simply, or these are recommended goals to improve. So if you can't prioritize yourself and you're not sure where to start, you could start under the improvement report to say, okay, these are the areas that I would like to improve on. In terms of improving, I'm just going to reiterate that policies are much easier to improve on than actual outcomes are. So usually that's where you start if you're looking at improvements, and tie it to what will give you the biggest return on investment as an organization. You can run the bookmark report like I mentioned, so areas that you want to come back to, and it'll all be listed here. Which makes it just a little bit easier to navigate. The B impact report is kind of interesting. It basically uses the information of the 100,000 users that are actually using the B impact assessment and gives you an idea of where your company is actually scoring. So if we see here, my ice cream shop is at 37.9. Most users that are in my industry are actually at 49.3. So I can see that I'm actually below the average user in my industry. I do need to achieve 80 to get B Corp certification, so I have a ways to go. And the companies that have actually scored a medium score for Best for the World honorees, so these are the top 10% of the companies in my industry, are actually scoring 131. And I have a feeling that probably Ben & Jerry's is in there as one of these companies. You can also take a look at it a little bit more granular based on the subsections, and then of course your impact business model is also listed here. So you can see here that most companies in mission engagement are actually only at 0.5, but I'm at 2.1, so I'm actually doing a lot better. If we look at workers, under health and wellness, I'm on equal, and I'm not doing as good in career development and engagement and satisfaction just yet. So it's kind of an interesting report to look at in case if you're wondering, how you're doing comparatively. So basically that is how to navigate within the impact assessment. Hopefully that was helpful, and I always find it really helpful to go through this before you actually get started. Any questions before I leave here?
Question for you regarding, so once you've gone through the process here and you've hit submit, will the review of your submission also come through the same portal?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
And is there like a live actual conversation portion of that, or is it really just kind of like the teacher marked up your test and then here are all the areas where they're looking for information, and you will continue to submit all of your changes and proof of information through this portal?
Yeah, so the certification process does vary between if you're 0 to 8 employees, and then 8 up to so many, and then all the way up to large and multinational. So they do vary based on the due diligence that B-Lab will do with you. If you're a smaller organization under 8 employees, it's often done in a cohort method. And in that method, I would be recommending that you do your articles of incorporation before you submit, because it's a requirement, but it technically is supposed to be a slightly quicker assessment program. And what they'll do is once you submit, they'll contact you and tell you that you will be reviewed during, this window of time. And then you agree to that window of time. And that is simply because what the standards team was finding is that when they were contacting the companies who had submitted, they just weren't getting back to them. They weren't really engaged in the process. And then often their certification would fall through the tracks because the standards team was just constantly following up with actually not getting anything done, which was a problem. So they created the cohort method where you choose the 2 weeks that you're going to work with B-Lab on your certification. And a lot of that process is done electronically. So you'll be getting emails and clarification questions, and you have to then get back to them and write to them what the clarification is or provide another policy and procedure. And then if everything's met and you're over the 80 point, you'll be given a term sheet. The other processes are a little bit more individual. So they will have a standards review call with you and go through everything. They may ask for additional policy and procedures, etc. If everything's over 80, they'll give you a term sheet, for example. And for large and multinationals, they have a lot of more steps to go through. They have to actually go through some pre-steps before they can even engage and start the process, just because they're a large organization that has much more to do than, say, a smaller organization. So, yeah. Any questions before I leave here? It's all making sense?
All right, team. Just out of interest of social media and publishing things, can I get everyone to turn on their camera so I can take an awesome screenshot of the grid? Yeah. Looking good, looking good. All right. With a little SBX logo on the bottom. I love it, Meg. Okay. In 3, 2, 1, smiling faces. Fantastic.
Great.
Well, Carla, thank you so much.
No problem.
For the team here, we recorded this, and it will be on our Slack channel, which I would love to review with you really quickly after Carla leaves us. I am going to do my darndest to make sure that we can get Carla back down the road at some point in time where we may have more questions that she can provide some insight into. I have created a BDC sub channel on our Slack channel, which I'm also going to knock on Craig and Emily and Carla's door to see, if they're available to answer a question here and there as we go down the road too. But for the purposes so far, super thankful to the team at BDC. Emily, you've been instrumental thus far, and thank you so much for bringing this to Craig and Carla's attention. Craig, who's not with us today, you got to see last time in our B Corp 101 bootcamp, and of course Carla, who we will hope to see again, and she does a lot of work, as she mentioned, the Getting to 80 program as well. We will look to have conversations with Carla and her team there, including a lady by the name of Christy, and see if we can't tap into them as a resource for you as well as we move down the road.